This episode is brought to you by PCL. PCL is a group of independent construction companies that operates throughout Canada, the United States, the Caribbean, and Australia. As one of the largest contracting organizations in North America, PCL completes more than $11 billion in work annually, building projects that shape communities. The company's 100% employee ownership model fuels a culture of commitment for clients in the buildings, civil infrastructure, heavy industrial, and solar markets. PCL's teams are proud to build with and learn from Indigenous communities in a number of places in this land. Learn more and watch PCL build at PCL.com.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Roots and Hoots, a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Since 2020, we have been gathering, laughing, learning hard truths, and sharing in community conversations with Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. Each episode, we learn something new, and we're excited to be sharing this journey with you. Roots and Hoots is about connecting with and celebrating Indigenous people's contributions to their fields of study, work, and cultures. We also speak with allies who share how they are furthering the work of reconciliation in Canada. To learn more about the Legacy of Hope Foundation and the work that we do, please visit legacyofhope.ca.
In this episode of Roots and Hoots, host Gordon speaks with publisher and filmmaker Rebeka Tabobondung. Rebeka is the founder and editor-in-chief of Muskrat Magazine, a leading online Indigenous arts and culture magazine. Rebeka is a powerful force in media, and her latest film project, Spirit of Birth, is an 8-part series which she directs and hosts. Spirit of Birth follows Indigenous midwives and families as they restore Indigenous birthing practices across Turtle Island. It is available through APTN Lumi, and links to it can also be found in our show notes. Please enjoy this special episode of Roots and Hoots.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Roots and Hoots. I'm your host, Gordon Spence, and our guest today is Rebeka Tabobondung. Hello, Rebeka, and how are you today?
Ani Bojo, I'm doing great, and thanks so much for having me.
Oh, that's good. That's good. It's always good to have a new guest, and we're always interested in talking to different people across Turtle Island, especially Canada. Canadians. The people are doing really good things. People are doing amazing things, and you're one of them. And maybe you can just start with telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your community, and your family background.
So I'm Anishinaabe from Wasauksing First Nation. And so we would say in the language, Ozawa Benisi Indigenikas, Wasauksing Donjaba, Amik Dodem. And so I'm also Beaver Clan. And my spirit name is Golden Thunderbird. And I've been here, I'm type of person that actually grew up in many places. And so I've been here in Ontario now for almost, I think, 25 years. But before that, I lived out west, and I lived in Alberta, throughout Alberta, and then also on the West Coast.
Wow. So you've been traveling quite a ways. I didn't catch the name of that reserve that you're from now. Where are you living now?
Yeah, it's Wasauksing First Nation.
Wasauksing. Where is that there?
That is in Ontario, and we're right on the waters of Lake Huron. So one of the Great Lakes, and we're an island community. And so we have a swing bridge that you have to cross to get here. Wow. And of course, we're surrounded by beautiful water, and we're about 3 hours north of Toronto.
Yeah. You're also you are the publisher and editor-in-chief of Muskrat Magazine, an Indigenous arts and culture magazine that's become such a vital space for storytelling. What inspired you to create it, and how is it involved today?
Oh, wow. Well, I think for me, it was inspired by our stories. And for myself is just learning about our traditional knowledge and spending time with knowledge keepers and realizing growing up that I didn't, have access to this knowledge. It wasn't part of any school curriculum and the schools that I attended. And that storytelling tradition, wasn't something that I was exposed to every day and growing up. So I realized as I was learning these stories, just how much I loved learning about it, but just the beautiful value and philosophies and ways of thinking about the world. and
Mhm.
the creativity, those things were so inspiring. And so that's what I wanted to do, was create a platform to share these stories in a
Yeah.
good way. And I've often thought, Indigenous knowledge has just so much to contribute in every single realm. And that's what I realize as I spend more time with elders and kind of live my own life. I'm learning from them as I go, and which started with Muskrat Magazine, but also into other media projects, and of
Yeah.
course, Spirit of Birth.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Ayaya songs are about our histories. Ayaya is an Inuit-owned firm that tells our stories in many languages across Canada. They are experts in publishing children's books, usually in syllabics, and they do large multi-language projects like the reports of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Commission. If you need help getting your stories into classrooms or homes in Cree, Inuktitut, or other Indigenous languages, check them out at ayaya.ca. That's ayaya.ca. Ayaya is a proud sponsor of the Roots and Hoots podcast.
Yeah. It's actually, when you were just talking about the magazine, Muskrat Magazine, and its content, and you're absolutely right. There's so much content because we're such an oral society. Most of our stories are not printed, but are passed down orally. And I mean, the potential for your magazine is just enormous. Especially with Indigenous knowledge that's out there. Maybe you could be. Maybe we could put an ad in your magazine.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Exactly. Like there, I do see that, that oral history,
Yeah.
there's all different ways to share these stories, and also that visual culture that we have. And
Yeah.
so many artists, and I'm deeply inspired by Indigenous artists, and
Yeah.
that is well for the magazine. We have been around for a while now. So we launched over 10 years ago, and as an online, and the political climate back then, it was, a conservative climate, and a lot of Indigenous organizations were struggling for funding, and
Yeah.
being censored if they were speaking out about Indigenous rights. And when I saw the potential to create an arts platform, I really thought that, that would fit well with, us being able to tell our stories in a way that was not censored,
Yeah.
because there's, of course, that celebration of
Right.
arts and
Yeah.
expression, and free
Yeah.
expression is valued also in the mainstream.
Hmm.
So, of course, it's the perfect platform to publish and talk about Indigenous issues and colonization and justice, and through the arts. So it's
Yeah.
captivating to the audiences, our own communities, but then it gave a freedom to talk about important issues that were
Yeah.
really being silenced, by the government of the time.
Now, if I was interested in reading your magazine, where would I go? How would I?
So you would
Would
go
I
online, and
yeah.
so it was free. And, you could go and peruse our over 25 issues. And then I find with Muskrat Magazine as well, like it pops up depending on just general searches, that
Yeah.
of topics that we've covered. So
Okay.
yeah, so I would just go online and check it out. Google Muskrat Magazine. And unfortunately, we have been a little bit not as out there lately. Of course, again, we're pulled into politics all the time, but because of the Meta ban on Canadian news, there's a
Okay.
ban on Facebook and anything owned by Meta and
Better.
Instagram. They
Yeah.
refuse to publish any Canadian news.
Okay.
And so they consider Muskrat Magazine Canadian news. So that's why our
Yeah.
presence isn't so much on those platforms.
What's
And
Mata?
Meta's the owners of that would be, Facebook, and Instagram, and Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay. Yeah, censorship, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing we realized too is, even though our communities love certain platforms, it's really important that we don't become, give them all of our power, to these
hmm
corporately controlled entities that can
Yeah,
just one day say, "Oh, I'll take that,"
yeah,
and
yeah,
they have your audience or whatnot.
right. What is Megan Productions?
Yeah, so Mayangan Productions is a web development and communications company.
Okay,
And Mayangan, it's a wolf in
right.
Ojibwe.
I thought
And
so.
yeah, my partner, David Schilling, he is a trained graphic designer and web developer. So we kind of, over the years, we support each other's work. And he's been a big support of Muskrat Magazine and
Yeah.
all these jobs that and projects that we do. He helps to bring them to life with his design team.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Megan is spelled. How would you like if someone would want to find more information on Megan Productions? How would they spell it?
We spell it MAAINGAN.com. And I know there's many ways to spell Mayangan. That's the thing with our
Yeah,
languages.
yeah, yeah.
We
That's
like
why I
to
asked you
go
to
art,
spell it out.
yeah. We go for the phonetic,
Yeah,
Dave and I, but
yeah.
it's still there's a lot of freedom in that.
I'm Korean. We say Megan. It's just kind of
Oh,
sounds similar. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's
I
a
was
very
reading your biography, and I really what caught my attention really was the Res 91.3 FM station, radio
yeah.
station that you I don't know you run this radio station because there's almost every community has a radio station or they're in some fashion or not, and we have one on our reserve, and it's really a very important communication tool for the community. When there's events going on, you make an announcement, and it's not run all the time, but there's certain hours that it's available for people to listen to. Tell us a little bit about your station and how did this come about? Did you buy this or did you
Yeah, well,
is it
we
on
were
loan?
fans. We didn't start the station. I believe it started in the 90s by a couple here from Wasauksing, Vince and Anita Chichok, and they, established it out of passion and it grew and evolved over the years. And we were huge fans of the station. And then they decided to retire. So there was an opportunity, we didn't want to see it fold or retire with them. So my
Hmm.
partner and I, we took that on, and we're not, trained broadcasters, but, we love music
Yeah,
and community events and storytelling. And
yeah,
so we've been running the station and evolving the music and the sound and continuing to like envision what it could be. So it
yeah,
continues to grow. And yeah, so we've taken that on and, it's great. And our broadcast covers our community, but then even extends. We have the little town of Perry Sound, which is pretty close to
yeah,
here. So
yeah.
we cover the local town
Okay.
as well.
This episode is brought to you by PCL. PCL is a group of independent construction companies that operates throughout Canada, the United States, the Caribbean, and Australia. As one of the largest contracting organizations in North America, PCL completes more than $11 billion in work annually, building projects that shape communities. The company's 100% employee ownership model fuels a culture of commitment for clients in the buildings, civil infrastructure, heavy industrial, and solar market. PCL's teams are proud to build with and learn from Indigenous communities in a number of places in this land. Learn more and watch PCL build at PCL.com.
Tell us about your APT and docuseries. I guess you worked with them, collaborated with them on a docuseries called The Spirit of Birth, and how did this come about? You got an 8-part series on this?
Yeah. So this is, yep, an 8-part series, and it's recently been released, all 8 episodes on APTN Lumi, that's their digital platform.
Yeah.
And it basically follows Indigenous communities, midwives, families, and knowledge keepers as they work to restore birth in their
Yeah.
communities.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I myself am the host of the show. And it started, just through my own experience 19 years ago now of becoming a mom and realizing, wow, this is such a huge life stage, like for families to become parents and to bring life into this world. It changes absolutely everything. And it is so
Mhm.
deeply profound. And at that time, I was kind of searching like for more knowledge just about that life stage, becoming a mom. What does that mean, in the Anishinaabe way of thinking and in that spiritual way? And I started asking people in my community. And my dad and we were building a cabin here in Wasauksing. And that summer, and then he started sharing stories. Oh, did you know your great grandmother Lucy was a midwife?
Mhm.
And I was just like, what? That's just so cool.
Yeah.
And then I was very fortunate. I had the opportunity there were Indigenous midwives that were just getting started in Toronto. So although we didn't have any midwives here in Wasauksing, I was living in Toronto. So I would come here in the summer, like I said, building a cabin. But my care was in Toronto. And so I asked them, could you share some of your traditional knowledge, like cultural knowledge about birth? And so they said, we're just learning ourselves as well. We've been trained, as midwives, but in a Western, framework or institutions. And, there's a huge project to be done for us to unearth this knowledge and preserve it, share it. And so then I decided at that point, okay, this is what I want to do, like focus on is in my own community is ask, like, what is our traditional knowledge? And
Yeah.
so then I started connecting with elders and parents in my community. And, it was such a eye-opening, like heart-opening experience to learn about our sacred knowledge as, what that means to be a life giver, our
Mhm.
responsibilities, our stories. And I feel like I've just been on this road ever since.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
keep asking and learning more about it.
Right.
And so I did my master's thesis on the topic of traditional birth knowledge from here and worked with many elders over the years and looking how can we record this knowledge, but then incorporate it into our birth experiences and everyday life. And then that's what I realized, wow, like this is something that so many people are interested in, like so
Mhm.
many young families
Yeah.
they want to, bring some of these traditions into their birth experiences, this cultural knowledge. And one of the main tenets of our cultural knowledge, especially like from what I learned from Anishinaabe, but also Cree, is the most important thing. And this was talking to a Cree Indigenous midwife she's in her 90s, and I had the
Mhm.
opportunity to interview her. She said the number one thing, the number one teaching when caring for pregnant women, the number one way we proceed is with kindness.
Yeah.
Kindness is the number one teaching, and that she is to be treated, with kindness
Yeah.
in every aspect. So the woman gets to, decide everything that she can, that she would like to about her birth. She decides where she wants to
Mhm.
have her baby. She
Yeah.
decides what medicines she wants to include, what people she wants, that make her feel safe. And when the mother feels safe, then, that takes care of the baby.
Yeah.
because the baby feels everything, of course, that the mother feels.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the responsibility, of the community, it's the whole community, including the dads, is to treat that pregnant mom with kindness
Yeah.
because we don't want her to be stressed out. We don't want her to be worried, you know?
Yeah. Why is like indigenous birth sovereignty? Is that kind of what you're talking about? And the importance of that process to the community healing. Can you tie that together?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I feel, yes, it's that sovereignty, that ability to be able to determine what cultural and traditional or ways of approaching um, birth that the community wants and making those spaces for that. So it was so great with Spirit of Birth, the series. I was able to visit 6 different communities
Yeah.
and they were all very different. Like, so some were Cree or Anishinaabe or Mohawk. Some were like downtown Toronto or rural, southern rural. Or as I mentioned, one of the Cree communities is in Chisasibe, which is more the southern part of Hudson's Bay. And so much more um, remote where they would have to fly out for
Mhm.
birth. So they would have
Yeah.
something called birth evacuations because they didn't have midwives in the community. So, and then some people are just, just starting to vision like, how we know we want birth back, but what does that look like, for us? What do we want and how are we going to go
Mhm.
about, making that happen?
Yeah.
So, um, so that's that kind of process where communities will be able to spend some time visioning and consulting with elders, with families, like what would we like to see? What's important to us? For some communities, it's being able to bring their medicines, like they might already be close to a hospital. They don't yet have their own, birth center or such, but, they want to be able to smudge at the hospital. They want to be able to invite their families to come, like more than just a partner, into the room and
Yeah.
have that, bring their cultural items, their drums or their songs. They want to have that baby, be spoken to in the language when they're born. Or for some people, they want to, take the placenta home with them and be
Yeah.
able to have a ceremony later on and just be treated with respect. And no matter
Yeah.
what they decide to do, that they have this culturally safe care
Yeah.
where Indigenous approaches to birth, Indigenous culture is respected.
Yeah. When I was being born,
Yeah.
my mother had to leave the community as well, and there was no everyone, all the women that were going to give birth had to be sent out to the Paw or another town. Thompson, I guess, is nowadays, and they're still doing that. I'm pretty sure in our reserve. And before that happened, before they used to have to do that, they had midwives on the reserves. They had people that could look after a woman that's giving birth. But I wanted to ask you about what you brought up there about the placenta and its sacredness, and maybe you can just talk a little bit about that, what it is, and how important that is to as part of the birthing process, and is it something that's it's sacred to Indigenous women?
Hmm. Yeah, there's so many beautiful teachings I learned about the placenta. And of course, the placenta is, this organ that grows, for the baby. And
Hmm.
its job is to protect the baby and to feed the baby, during that 9 months. And so that, in and of itself is something that is truly amazing, that it's able to provide everything that the baby needs. And when I started to hear teachings about it, there's the idea, of course, that we have a spiritual relationship as well to the placenta, and that the placenta itself also has a spirit. So
Hmm.
that placenta is really in its DNA, its makeup, it is the exact makeup as the baby itself.
Wow.
And it has its own little spirit. And its purpose, is to protect and nourish the
Hmm.
baby. And when the baby's born, it also can fulfill a role of really providing, nutrients still to the baby, like through the cord once the baby is born. And it, in a sense, it sacrifices itself for the life of the baby, of the other spirit. And
Yeah.
so when people think about the spirit of the placenta, it's about kind of honoring that
Hmm.
sacrifice, honoring
Yeah.
that spirit
Yeah.
and thanking it, and being grateful for everything that it brought, to
Yeah.
the family and the community. And so, for example, when I was in Kahiwan, which is a Cree community um, in Alberta, they did a community placenta ceremony there. And they were sharing with the moms. They brought cloth with them, but they wrapped the placenta up just like a baby. They bundled and
Hmm.
swaddled the placenta.
Yeah.
And then they thanked it and they shared their special songs. And then they went and buried the placenta. So they had a burial where they placed the placentas in the direction of the western door.
Yeah.
And then it was like, kind of end of life honoring,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
those little spirits. And what the belief that I hear from many, many people, many cultures as well, is when you bury those placentas, like it's a special place that you bury them. What's might be special to you, like where your family land might be, or a grove of trees that are meaningful. And so you're giving that back to the land. The placenta itself is going to nourish the land. So you're returning that and thanking the natural worlds for, helping, that's going to hopefully guide our children.
Hmm.
And then by burying that placenta, you're grounding them to that
Yeah.
land. So they'll feel like they're connected,
Yeah.
like they have a very strong and spiritual connection
Mhm.
to the land.
Yeah.
And so, some people, yeah, like I hear lots of moms, like they're like, where should I bury my placenta? Because I want my child to be connected here, but I also want,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
I also have been living here. Like it's for some people, they really think a
Yeah.
lot about it, where they want to do that.
Mhm.
And I've even heard some people, they might even like have two children and they'll bury one placenta. I want one kid close to home and then another one goes to the
Mhm.
ocean and they want them to be travelers.
Wow.
So like different
Yeah.
people have different ways of thinking about it.
Yeah. I never heard about this before, and this is truly amazing. And the importance of this placenta be part of life, and it's continuing and its sacredness, and like it's something that I've learned just by talking to you today.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Ayaya songs are about our histories. Ayaya is an Inuit-owned firm that tells our stories in many languages across Canada. They are experts in publishing children's books, usually in syllabics, and they do large multi-language projects like the reports of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Commission. If you need help getting your stories into classrooms or homes in Cree, Inuktitut, or other Indigenous languages, check them out at ayaya.ca. That's ayaya.ca. Ayaya is a proud sponsor of the Roots and Hoots podcast.
There's just one more question I want to ask you, and we've been talking about reconciliation for a few years now, and people have different opinions about reconciliation and trying to make our country a better country, and I think everybody needs to play their part, and so when you hear the word reconciliation, what comes to your mind, and what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I feel, that word, we've been using it for so long. And I feel like in the past 10 years, I see Canada, the mainstream, really embrace that word or start to take that word seriously, and of course with the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and seeing how the government seemed to, take those calls to action pretty seriously and mandated those calls to action like in different sectors. And I was very supportive. I'm very supportive of that. For example, in media, that media, Indigenous voices be included in different broadcasting and all funding models and space for and programming. And I just saw that immediately, like once those calls to action were mandated like that, like I saw the difference in places like CBC, like a bunch of, Indigenous shows came on air. And same with, the Film Institute, the Indigenous Screen Office.
Yeah.
Like those institutions are so important that we have those. And then and same within healthcare and same within education. So that needs to happen. The government needs to take that seriously. And I feel like as a society, it's relationship building. We need to continuously be having conversations together and educating one another. And that was something that was interesting, like in Spirit of Birth, when I went to Kihiwan and that placenta ceremony happened, and they had built a lodge, but the organizers, they invited two nurses, non-Indigenous nurses, to come from the local hospital. And, so many people had had negative experiences at that hospital of racism and not feeling comfortable or safe there. And they decided to invite them so that they would have understanding, and when somebody asks for their placenta, this is why, and it
Yeah.
was really interesting, like just to see, I got to watch them react, and it was very meaningful and very powerful for them. So anyways, when I think of reconciliation, like I feel like there's a meaningful education or relationship, and that needs to happen, but that systems need to change as a result. It's not just something to acknowledge. It's systems change, and that includes everything, from funding models to land back to looking at the world, like, let's include different lenses. So anyways, I hope that our government doesn't, move away from that path. I think it would be very sad if we go backwards in Canada and start to push Indigenous rights away because now, we're worried about, the US not being our main trading partner anymore. We still need we can't just throw all our values away and, reconciliation away because of that. That's not the direction we should go at all.
Well said. Thank you very much. I want to thank you on behalf of Legacy Hope Foundation for taking the time to do this with us. Thank you, Rebeka Tabobondung.
Okay, well, miigwech, thank you so much for the invitation. Bamapi.
You're welcome. Have a good day. Egusi.
Roots and Hoots is a podcast project produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For episode show notes, please visit the podcast description and make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. For more information about the work we do, please visit legacyofhope.ca.